What I'm going to ask you to do is sit in the chair, with your eyes closed, and pick a tune that you love, like Nardis, or Footprints, or Solar, or any great tune. Not a hard tune, or Maiden Voyage. You know the tune like you know your name. And start the tune in your mind's ear, in the inner ear of yourself. Don't sing it, don't play it, imagine it. Of course, don't sing. Imagine the head, really play it, go through it in time. And then take a solo in your ear. Imagine hearing the solo. What happened to me was I was startled because it felt great, creative, things I never played before. I never dreamed. Why? Why couldn't I do that at the piano? The instrument. The instrument, you spend so much time with the instrument that sometimes it plays you. If you're sitting in the chair, there's no piano or sax or drums. It's pure thought and imagination. Play through a whole solo. Try to play through a whole solo. I mean, you don't have to worry about the chords, but think the melody, the melody, the melody, your melodic improvisation. You will be astounded at what you come up with. It will be very different, it was for me, than what I would play on the piano. We all are creatures of habit. We all have patterns, me too. If I start a phrase, sometimes my fingers or my ear will finish it. No, that's repetition. And the worst thing is cliche, but you want the new, the fresh.
Well, that was from one of the many conversations that I recorded throughout the past 5 years with the great pianist, composer, and educator Richie Beirach. Now, you may not know that Richie has been recently struggling with some pretty serious health issues that have rendered him unable to perform and that have led to a severe financial crisis for Richie. And in a bit, I'll talk about a crowdfund that we put together to help him. And I thought this was a good time to create a video that illustrates the tremendous musical mind of my friend and the good fortune I've had to befriend Richie and help him document his ideas on performing, composing, and teaching music. I mean, I've gained an incredible education through my accidental friendship with Richie. But before getting into that, a GoFundMe campaign has been created in order to help Richie with his over 100,000 euro medical expenses that he's not even close to covering himself. So if you'd like to help with Richie's medical expenses, I've put a link to the GoFundMe campaign in the description below. And all of us close to Richie, we thank you for any help that you can offer. For the first time in over 5 years, I've gone months without my daily chat or email from Richie. And that absence has reminded me how lucky I am to have a friend and a mentor the caliber of Richie Beirach. You know, Richie fulfilled my natural curiosity for music, and over this time I've gained far more from Richie than he'll ever know. Back in late 2019, whispers about a pandemic were starting to get louder and louder. You know, it was starting to seem pretty serious and something that we were all starting to protect ourselves from. That was when I first met Richie. I was creating a virtual summit, a virtual jazz event called the Jazz Master Summit. That was late in 2019. And unbeknownst to me, my timing was really good for putting this online event together. I had reached out to Dave Liedman, who agreed to an interview. And after we finished, I asked if he would introduce me to his best friend, Richie. And he wrote Richie a very short email. Lieb is not long on words. And his email basically was, "Good cat, knows some shit, wants to talk." Well, Richie quickly wrote me back, and he was super enthusiastic about the interview, and I was thrilled. I've always been a fan of Richie, and it started all the way back to the late 70s when Richie and Lieb, they played a duo concert at the Argo Sante community in the Arizona desert that's just north of Phoenix. I didn't really understand technically what they were playing up on that desert cliff, but I related to the audacity and the fire and the freshness of it. And since then, I've always enjoyed listening to Richie, who was, an exciting contrast to me to most of what I had heard played on the piano. And I respected Richie wanting to be his own man on the piano and not trying to sound like somebody else. So the interview for my virtual event. The only problem was at that time, Richie's only computer was one of those old IBM ThinkPad relics with that stupid little red dot in the center. I told Richie I was doing video interviews with everyone and that I'd like to record, and then he abruptly stopped me and said, "No, I don't use my camera. Security problems." Okay, then maybe we could do it over the phone? And he was open to that. But now how do I record the phone? It's a bit of a technical mess, plus his reception from Germany was terrible. But oblivious to the technical problems, Richie, he was really into the interview. So we talked for over 3 hours, the longest interview I did with anybody. But the recording was barely audible, and in order to make it into a video like all of the other interviews, I had to create video imagery throughout the entire 3 hours. That was well worth it though, because I could tell that this was someone with a lot to say who was passionate and who really knew his shit. He wanted to express himself. I finally published all 3 hours in 2 parts that you can see on my site. And he loved what I put together despite, the somewhat garbled audio. Now after that, we started getting to know each other, and he was beginning to trust me, so he eventually agreed to do a Zoom call using his computer's camera. But, because of the age of that ancient computer, the camera was almost worthless. I told him that his beloved ThinkPad was probably on its last legs, but, he assured me that it was fine and that he didn't want to mess with it. And then ironically, a few days later, he called me up, "Dude, my computer won't start. You got to help me." Well, I knew that there was nothing to do to resurrect that dinosaur of a computer, so I told him I'd buy him a new computer. Now, Richie, it's going to be an Apple Macintosh computer. It's called an iMac. And that scared him, but I assured him I'd do whatever he needed in order to get it up and running to his complete satisfaction. And Richie will tell you that I've been excellent tech support ever since. So with this iMac, I was investing in a camera and a microphone that would help me record the brilliance of this great mind. And after delivery of the machine and some panicked early morning phone calls from Richie and a fair amount of remote tech support from me, Richie had what he frequently reminds me is an amazing machine that really changed his life. I mean, his beloved YouTube jazz videos have never looked and sounded so beautiful. So we got to work. I'd send him a Zoom link and he'd join. I'd ask questions, and boy, did he have answers. Early on, I wasn't exactly sure how we'd use these recordings, but I knew there was gold here. We talked about music, about film, art, life. He's the proverbial professor. Now remember, this was during the height of COVID. Richie's gigs were all canceled. He had an Italian tour with Lieb, that was canceled. And there he was locked down in Germany with nothing to do. And he loved the opportunity to talk about music with a curious guy like me. And Richie appreciated that he and I very much agreed on the foundations of playing music well. We disagree on things, but on the principles of music performance and education, we are simpatico. I started transcribing our conversations and putting them as PDFs. He loves to talk about Herbie and Bill Evans. We recorded his tribute to Bird on Bird's 100th anniversary. We talked in great detail about his first take with Jack DeJohnette, Dave Holland on the tune Snow Leopard for ECM. That was the trio album called Elm. We published a long-form piece on the intersection of great art and commercial success. We used the Cologne concert, Kind of Blue, and Love Supreme as examples. There was no shortage of material for Richie and me to discuss. Then he called me up one day and he said, I want to talk about those incredible improvised intros Bill Evans played on Nardis toward the end of his life. And of course, that led to his opinion on who actually wrote Nardis, which we also published from our recorded conversations. I've never met anyone with Richie's passion and conviction of opinion. I mean, Richie doesn't recite the politically correct, the accepted opinions of the masses and making sure that he's in line with what everybody else says. These are his personal thoughts gained through a lifetime of listening, playing, thinking, lots of thinking, but also of feeling. I mean, Richie is crystal clear on how his music is generated, starting from a feeling about something or someone, and then how that cascades down to his hands at the speed of light. He calls that process heart, ear, hand. Even though he has passion-driven opinions and, sometimes a dogmatic stance on many things, he's always willing to listen to contrary opinions. So we've had long talks about business and politics in which I give him my views, which are usually pretty different from most musicians. And certainly they used to be uncomfortable for Richie, but I'll write something out that clarifies a topic we just discussed, and he'll call me back an hour later and says, I read what you wrote 3 times, dude, and I really dig it. One day we decided to actually publish a book on his thoughts on being a better jazz musician. And the results was our first book called A Framework for Jazz Mastery. I mean, he was so happy that he had the opportunity to memorialize his convictions and his thoughts and his experiences on becoming a better jazz musician. Now he had something tangible. A few months later, he said he wanted to record something that paid tribute to the 10 greatest jazz pianists of the last 100 years or so. We fired up Zoom, and Richie extemporaneously launched into an hour-plus, well-organized, vivid description of Art Tatum, Bud Powell, Monk, Bill Evans, 3 more the next day and more after that, until he had essentialized all 10 pianists that he believed were the lineage of modern jazz piano. Okay, bro, we're recording.
Good. Now, I must preface all my words with this, and this is very important for everyone to realize. I have compiled a list of the 10 essential modern jazz pianists. And I have left many wonderful pianists out, some of my own favorites, because the list is not about my favorites or who I think the best is. The list is about who is essential to the historical continuum of the development of modern jazz piano. When I say modern, that means I'm not starting in 1900 with U.B. Blake, with James B. Johnson, Fats Waller. I'm not going to include Teddy Wilson or Earl Hines or Errol Garner. Okay, I'm aware of them, but I'm starting with Art Tatum. Here's the 10: Art Tatum, Bud Powell, Thelonious Monk, Bill Evans, Paul Bley, Herbie Hancock, McCoy Tyner, Chick Corea, Keith Jarrett, and Cecil Taylor. Again, these are my opinion, the most essential and most influential in the history of modern jazz piano.
My job in transcribing and editing all of these recordings is to retain Richie's brilliant insight while tightening up the language and maybe calming down the occasional emotional outrage over a topic he feels really strong about. That topic can be a new recording of someone that Richie thinks is phoning it in or who doesn't have a direction. It can be a YouTube video of a player who's trying to teach piano online and, let's say not exactly teaching to Richie's standards. Another was the film Whiplash. I mean, Richie hated that film and all the others that make jazz musicians out to be, hapless, druggy losers. Here's an example of our raw video conversation that turned into a PDF and eventually into a chapter on our last book, Teaching and Learning Jazz.
Being a jazz musician, jazz pianist in this world and trying to make a living and having a full life, it's very difficult. It's pushing the rock up the hill just because it's a niche thing. It's a niche within a niche. And especially in a profession of music, when everyone is trying to make you be something else that's already established. To be yourself is the whole point in jazz. So I think that courage is very important part of being an artist, maintaining being an artist, and being comfortable with it. And I really never had a choice. It was always something that I wanted, to the exclusion of almost everything. So I just decided that whatever it took, I was going to do it. It was not like, wow, I think that's going to be hard. No, I was doing it. And the truth is, somebody older told me, said, if you have to think about whether you should do it, you shouldn't do it, because it eats your life and it gives you but tremendous rewards, which I've had.
Then one day Richie calls and asks, what's a vlog or a video blog? Now keep in mind that just a couple of years ago, Richie refused to even turn on his computer camera. Now he wants to make videos for his website. I had built him a new website a few months prior, and that kind of provided him a nice reflection of him and his work, including his entire discography. He was really happy with his new online presence, which, before this, he knew he had a website, but, didn't pay attention to it. And his first video was on his sadness for how the pandemic had all but killed live performance, his and everyone else's that he knew. The second video we recorded was on the war in Ukraine. Now, Richie is part Ukrainian, and he's very upset over Putin's merciless and senseless invasion of that sovereign country.
This is not an angry rebuttal or show of bitterness for the world. But I do want to use this to just lay out how I feel about what's going on in the world now, and also some history about me and my life experiences and why I have come to these conclusions. And I'd like to share them with you because there might be people that agree or disagree.
These videos reflect Richie's boundless passion for everything from the music he loves, to the great musicians and the friends who play it well, to the injustices that he sees throughout the world. And I'm grateful for what I've learned throughout it all, and that he's allowed me into his thinking and to his communication of all of this in audio, video, and print. He may be retired from the professorship at the Leipzig Conservatory of Music in Germany, but at least for me and others who are watching his videos and reading our books, class is very much still in session. So we're hoping that Richie soon recovers and continues to share with the world his thoughts on music and on life. And again, Richie needs your help. And if you're able to give some small portion to offset his medical expenses, consider donating something to his GoFundMe campaign in the address in the description that I put below. But regardless, I hope this gives you a little greater appreciation for this great artist and wonderful person. Richie and I thank you.